feel like the entire process of college admissions and high school in general is very fresh in my mind, so I'll just take you through my high school journey and some takeaways, tips, and also suggestions that I have. So in my freshman year, it was online learning. So I think that this was a really easy year for me, at least, because the transition into high school wasn't as daunting as it seemed. I did take a few higher level classes such as honors biology and English, and I also took math over the summer before freshman year to take integrated math too during the fall of my freshman year. But honestly, I don't think they were too bad because the way online learning was, we would get out at like 12 p.m. every single day, and then we'd have office hours that were optional for an hour. So I had a lot of time to kind of enjoy my pursuits and other passions, which led me to joining a lot of clubs. So because there wasn't really a social aspect as we were all online, I thought it would be a good idea to join lots of clubs. So right here I've listed like the main ones I joined, which were HOSA, UniSci, Math Club, Mu Alpha Theta, and CSF. Mostly revolved around STEM and healthcare because I did have an interest in healthcare and medicine since I was a kid. I really thought that learning about anatomy and like things related to healthcare were really interesting. So I thought that the clubs were a good way to pursue that, and I think they were. By the time freshman year ended, I think I narrowed down my club interests. So lots of clubs I joined freshman year, but decided that they weren't really my style, or at least not as interesting as I thought they'd be at first. And I think that's totally fine as a freshman. I feel like that year is really just all for exploration, and that's what I eventually did. And one of the most notable things that you can see on the right-hand side is that I was one of two Science Olympiad freshmen. Science Olympiad is basically like a competition with lots of different events that you do within a team for there's different high school levels, like there's high school, middle school, and elementary, but we competed on the high school level, and this year we did it online. We had a really small, like closely knit group, so I feel like I learned a lot from the upperclassmen there as my mentors, and also I just learned about different fields of science that I didn't really explore in the past. Also, the summer after my freshman year, I did an online outreach program with UCLA, which was basically like college readiness and preparation in a sense. And I thought that was really helpful because they went over like the UC system, also like what college essays were like. And so that was like my first taste of essentially preparing for college, even though freshman year is a pretty early time to start thinking about that. Going into my sophomore year, this was the time when we finally went in person, and I really thought that the transition was harder than I thought it was going to be. I took my first AP, which was world history, and if you guys have taken it before, you know that it's extremely daunting, and I'm just not a history person in general, so it was pretty hard for me to deal with like weekly homework and tests and all of that. And I also did take more honors, which included chemistry, math, and English, math denoted by A3. And one thing to note was that my honors chem teacher was not present for the entire school year because she was on medical leave, and we had a substitute who didn't really cover material, and that'll kind of tie into my decisions later. But I was really unconfident about my skills in chemistry because I just didn't have a lot of experience with it. But aside from that, I did continue with leadership positions in clubs that I mentioned earlier, and these positions really allowed me to take more impact and responsibilities. So I hosted webinars for HOSA. I did math field day and science field day, which are basically like competitions that high schools put on for the middle school level. And I think math field day and science field day at least are specific to Keppel. We cater towards local high schools, middle schools in our area, and we essentially just replicate the Olympiads that are available on the high school level for them. I also did take piano classes since I was young, but I finished those, as in I did all of the levels that were available through MTAC, which is the Music Teachers Association of California. And I didn't want to completely give up on that passion, so I decided to start a piano trio, which you can see on this right-hand side, the bottom um, with a few of my friends, and we basically just recorded covers of songs that we thought were interesting, and we posted them online, but also played them in person. So we played at like hospitals, senior homes, farmers markets, essentially everywhere that we wanted to do because it was really interesting to kind of like play in front of a wide audience of elderly usually, but also like families and people who just enjoyed music in general. This was also the time when I started shadowing. Because I had an interest in healthcare and that kind of grew throughout freshman year through my experiences, I thought it'd be a good time to learn about what it really is like to be a doctor, or at least in the healthcare field, every single day. And so I shadowed my primary care physician, who I actually did shadow until the end of my junior year, and a dentist who I actually hosted the webinar for HOSA with. And I think they were really great in giving me insights about the different kind of aspects because I learned from them that dentistry was not something I was extremely interested in, and I kind of catered towards primary care. So for a while, I thought I was going to be a pediatrician or some type of like family care physician. And I think they were really interesting because I got to not only talk with patients, but also see what the doctor's schedule is like and also like learn about different skills that are necessary, like healthcare screenings, for example. I also did start part-time work at an organization called Pure Health Exchange, which is essentially like a nonprofit healthcare organization that creates curriculums that are implemented at a high school level. And so I would help with creating that curriculum, giving youth voice, and basically contributing to youth advocacy, which they really emphasize within the organization. And I also did compete in Brain Bee, which is essentially a high school competition hosted between UCLA and USC that tests people about their neuroscience knowledge. And you can tell from my list of classes I took that I did not know anything about neuroscience, at least from those classes. But I think Brain Bee was really a push for me to kind of explore that field because I self studied using the college textbooks that were given through Brain Bee. And I think I learned a lot more about neuroscience, and that kind of sparked my interest in the whole entire field. During the summer, I did take biochemistry and organic chemistry at Brown, and that was really fun. You can see the photo right here is actually during my time at Brown. Our professor had a dog who he would bring in during class sessions if we like were good, I guess, or like if we felt like we needed a break, we could, like, pet him and stuff, and so it was really fun kind of going into there, and that was the first time we had chem labs because, as I said before, I did not have any labs from honors chemistry, so that was my first experience with it, and I kinda fell in love with it too because I learned that I'm a really hands-on learner. I need to do labs in order to have that information kind of stick in my brain, and so that was really helpful for me to kind of understand what kind of learning I'm interested in and also what field I want to do in the future. I also did a leadership conference through Johns Hopkins. It's called the GHLC Global Health Leadership Conference, and that is essentially like a conference where you're able to learn from different doctors around the world. They have like webinars where you can basically just listen in and ask them questions, hear about their experiences, and also listen to a few student-led speakers as well. My year, I took APUSH online because I did not like history, as you heard from WAP, and so I just didn't wanna do that junior year, so I took that. And I was also an intern at Fairshare, which is like a company that helps with marketing and communications. I think that kind of ties in line with my part-time work at PHE, because aside from just creating curriculums, I was also helping with promotional materials and, like, creating webinars, hosting essentially, and so I think that tied in well with my internship work at Fairshare, which was honestly a very valuable experience with at least working because I think that helped me with, like, learning about procedures that are common in the workplace and kind of how to carry yourself, and I also did community college classes. My junior year was, I think, the most daunting year, as most people would say. I had the hardest workload because I took AP Calc AB, Chemistry, Physics 1, Psych, and Lang, and I honestly do not know how junior year me balanced it all, but I feel like that was definitely a time where I had to focus in on my academics. Aside from that, I did want to continue leadership in clubs, so I think my junior year I started becoming, like, higher leadership positions in a sense. I was the president of Mu Alpha Theta and also vice president for my school's HOSA chapter. I was also a returner for PHE, and so had more responsibilities in it because I was someone who would mentor the younger people who just came in, or I would basically be involved more in giving my opinions because I had worked with them for longer. I also did APYLP, which is the Asian Pacific Youth Leadership Project. It's like a conference that they held for 50 API Californians every single year. And so I applied for that and I got to learn about like leadership advocacy and Asian representation, which was really cool because even though I did think I was going into STEM, I still wanted to learn more about that. So I just decided to do it. And also Distinguished Young Woman, which is basically like a competition where you can earn scholarships. And I believe Isabel will talk more about that too. But it's definitely a really fun way to learn about other people, in the area at least, also compete and test your skills because I believe they have, like, interview portions, also, scholarships, like, they're scholastics essentially, and you'll be rewarded in scholarships if you place in a certain, percentile of their competitors that year. Over the summer, I was an intern through the Child Mind Institute, and that was stationed at Cal State LA. So you can see through the picture, um, the third or bottom picture, that's me with my teammates, and essentially what we did was we conducted our own research about homelessness and how that intertwines with mental health in the Los Angeles region, and we have a few mentors over there who really helped us with conducting our research, and I think that was the first kind of official summer program I did that involved such a thing, so I think that was really valuable as well. I continued GHLC for a second year, and I was also an intern for Think Neuro, where I was able to do um, asynchronous research on neuroscience because, as I said before, doing Brain Bee really helped me learn that I was interested in the brain in general. And so I did research about Rett syndrome, which is basically a disease that affects mostly girls and younger people in general. So I think that was really interesting. I also became a youth commissioner on the Community Participation Commission for my local area, and I also continued the community college classes. So a lot of things I did during like the sophomore and junior year, but I think they were really helpful in the end because there are a lot of different experiences that I think I was able to talk about in the end. Senior year, I think, my course load wasn't as hard as junior year in my opinion. I took AP Bio, Calc BC, Econ, and Spanish Lang, and then I took MedTerm, which was a regular class, but I think it gave me a lot of insights towards the healthcare field again. I continued doing independent neurological disorders research, but specifically about Huntington's disease and schizophrenia, and I was able to publish, I think one of my independent works, and I was also able to talk about that at a symposium, which was really cool and interesting because I never thought I would be able to do research of that kind, and I definitely want to continue that in college too. I also elevated my leadership positions, so I was the president for HOSA Math Club, United Sciences, the GHC Ambassadors, and Mu Alpha Theta, and I was the vice president of Science National Honor Society, and also continued my commitments with Science Olympiad and also Alliance, which is like a organization at school that helps fundraise. I also did more initiative and work at GHC. I became an intern for them, so after school, once or twice a week, I would come into the office and help them with whatever they needed to do. And I think that the internship responsibilities were different from the club ones in that, it was really hands-on, and again, I got to learn about, like, hosting your own events essentially and conversing with their own patients. At PHE, I also started initiatives, so I was able to, like, host webinars about youth homelessness and their visibility, and yeah, I think that GHC and PHE definitely took a lot of my time, but they were very rewarding because I really liked the work that I did. I also applied to a lot of scholarships, which is a tip that I recommend for all juniors or like high schoolers to really think about scholarships because at least once you go through the college app process, you can use a lot of the drafts that you have for your essays and use that towards scholarships. So it's kind of like killing two birds with one stone. And I made it a goal to make the most out of my memories, essentially, and I think from the pictures that you see on the right, I really did. Another thing to note is that during the fall, I went to fly-in programs, which are essentially programs that a certain college will host for mainly FGLI, first gen and or low income students, and I did it at Harvey Mudd in Pomona. The one on the top right is from Harvey Mudd, and I was able to meet basically a lot of other students who were all seniors and all wanted to go through the college application process, but were kind of unsure or like needed extra support essentially. And so that was really valuable because we got to stay at the college for a few days, got to take classes, listen in on lectures, and also talk with the professors and the admissions counselors. So you learn a lot through those programs. So towards the college app process, which I think most high schoolers at least will need to go through at one point. Um, I think the first thing I went through was major choice because for some time I was interested in biochemistry, just because I liked bio and chem in school. But I also did like neuroscience, as I talked about before, because of the research that I had done and also the Brain Bee competition. And I really had to make a choice between which ones I wanted to put as a major. But essentially, I think for the majority of the schools I applied as a biochem major, and if they didn't have it, then I applied as a neuroscience major. I applied to the UC's privates and two BSMD programs, which are programs that basically admit you to both the undergrad and also med school. And they're typically combined, as in you don't have to complete another medical school application once you go through your years of undergrad and complete all of the prerequisites. I also started UCPIQs the summer before senior year because they're actually different from most private school applications. There's a set of, I think, 8 questions, and you have to choose to answer 4 of them, and they never really change. So, actually, if you're a high school junior, incoming senior right now, you can get started on them already. But I did those during the summer, and I think that was really wise of me because I used them as templates or drafts for my other essays during the fall, and I think that that really helped because it was kind of the start of college writing, and I think that's vastly different from most essays that I've done in the past. And as I said before, I continuously edited my Common App essay, which is like the main 650 personal statement, and completed supplementals during the school year. Um, and when it came to choosing a college, I was able to find merit scholarships from USC, Johns Hopkins, Pitt, and UCI, which I really did take into consideration. And I ultimately had to narrow it down between the traditional pre-med life at Stanford and the BSMD program at Pitt. So you can see that's me with the Pitt School of Medicine because I eventually did choose that, but it was also me with the tree because I, for a long time, was deciding between those 2. And so this is basically my whole entire thought process when going between those 2 because it took me so long to actually understand what I wanted out of my college experience and whether or not I wanted to reapply to med school, essentially. Because the traditional path was 4 years undergrad, 4 years med school, and I had to consider if I were going to take gap years, and, basically, I would be required to take the MCAT and apply to med schools again, which was something I was not really looking forward to because I've heard how hard the MCAT is, and, like, I already struggled so hard with, like, preparing for the SAT in high school, so I didn't really wanna take another standardized test. And when applying to college, I had to denote interest in pre-med, but it was not necessarily binding, as in, like, I wasn't admitted to any med school. And specifically for Stanford, they don't make you choose a major until the end of your sophomore year, so there's a lot of flexibility with that. While at Pitt, the BSMD program is a guaranteed 4 years of undergrad and 4 years at the med school that Pitt has. The requirements are to keep up the GPA, but you don't have to take the MCAT, and you just need to take the prerequisite courses, and you'll be able to matriculate into their med school. I had to go through 2 additional supplemental rounds and also a mini interview series and filled out my med-related extracurriculars for Pitt's med school, and these were completely separate from the regular college application process. The med-related ECs I think they asked for were, like, shadowing or, like, clinical work in general, volunteering, and also any research that you've done, so those 3 kind of pillars were ones that they really emphasized, but the most important thing was that it was not binding to the med school, so although I did have a guaranteed seat in their class for med school after 4 years, I didn't really have to stick with that. I could choose to apply out, but I would have to take the MCAT again. So those were things I had to consider, but I ultimately chose Pitt because I kind of reflected on if I wanted the flexibility of undergrad or if I was set that I was going to become a doctor, and realizing now that, like, I didn't really envision myself in any other career besides medicine, I thought it'd be the best choice for myself to do a BSMD program because it would alleviate the stress, time, and energy that would be required to do, like, med school applications all over again, and so that was my personal choice, but I know that it differs between every single person, and you can ask more questions about the BSMD program or, like, that whole entire decision in general because it was very daunting. But now I'm going into tips when applying to college. Now that I've gone through the whole entire college application process, I'd say the number one thing is don't be afraid to show your personality and be creative in your essays. I think going into the college application process, I thought you had to be extremely serious, like show only the best sides of yourself to the college admissions officers because they won't like any other things. But honestly, I don't think that's true at all because if you show personality, then you're more memorable. And it's easier for the admissions officer to connect with you as a human because they're able to understand who you are, what you're interested in, and what you look forward to doing in college. I'd also say that when talking about your extracurricular activities, add metrics or actions in the description, which is actually an advice I got from a previous mentor, I believe. And I think it helped me a lot because metrics, for example, talking about the number of people you've impacted or like how many events you've held in the past are really helpful for people to understand what you've essentially done throughout high school and actions like leading or organizing essentially help again with them understanding what kind of role you had within those. Have trusted friends or mentors read and edit your essays, but don't feel like you need to accept every single suggestion. I think I had a lot of friends who were like a year older than me who had already gone through the college application process read, and I also had a few cousins who had already gone through the process read as well. But I didn't accept every single suggestion because I felt like some of them might have stripped away my own personal voice. And I don't think that you have to do that. It should be your essay, and somebody reading your essay should be able to tell that you wrote it, essentially, is what my mentality was going through the process. So that's one tip I have. And the last one is don't compare yourself to others because everyone has different goals, values, and needs. And I think that really helps, at least when all the college decisions come out, because comparison is a thief of happiness, essentially. And I feel like if you're comparing yourself to others and you don't really see your own achievements or kind of value yourself. So don't feel like you always have to compare yourself to others because you're just fighting against yourself. And my high school takeaways, which are not all about college, I'd say number one is to step outside of your comfort zone and challenge yourself. If you can't tell, I'm pretty introverted. I actually do not like public speaking at all. So the fact that I even said yes to this webinar is a little bit surprising if younger me heard that. But I think that's your sign to take and say yes to opportunities that you'll think you'll enjoy because high school is all about trying new things and seeing what that kind of takes you towards. So I think it's a really great way to kind of know about how you're able to grow personally. I think another thing is prioritize your friendships and making memories. I feel like I was very academically oriented, and that's not a bad thing, but I think at the same time you should really consider your friendships and make sure you have a close circle who you're able to rely on through your highs and lows. I also think it's a great thing to keep close relationships with teachers who will advocate for you. I am pretty shy, so I don't really talk in class that often, but I feel like teachers who I really resonated with or people who are advocating for me made my experience in high school a lot better because I was always looking forward to going to their classes and talking with them. And it really felt like I was getting to know them as a person rather than this like power dilemma between authority and a student. So I think really create close relationships because they'll always have you in the back of your head and be able to like kind of guide you to the right path. Also, learn how to study and improve time management. I feel like I got the hang of it towards the end of my junior year and beginning of senior year, but there's many different study habits and ways for retaining information that I feel like I didn't really know about until I had to actually do trial and error myself. But I learned that I really like hands-on learning, as I said before, and, like, using notes, but not audio or, like, kinesthetics, essentially, so I think, like, by narrowing that down, I really understood what was most productive for me, and improving my time management by writing down all my tasks and knowing what exactly I had to do in a given moment really helped because I made sure I wasn't extremely burnt out or stressed all the time because I knew that I had to do a certain task at a certain time. I also think you should do things you genuinely enjoy because you shouldn't get peer pressured and try to do stuff that you don't want to do. I think that would be burdensome and kind of something that you won't enjoy. So why would you spend your time on that essentially? And pursue them to the maximum because if you really like something, then I think it's a really great way to make your own mark or leave your own impact on it and see how that will grow. Because I think the most cherishing things that I enjoy about high school is doing those things I enjoyed with my friends and also being able to implement new ideas or create suggestions. And also, one last thing is failures can be turned into learning opportunities. The whole entire mindset, that's a growth mindset, is one that really talks about how learning opportunities are essentially ones that you'll find throughout high school because nothing is necessarily a failure. So, if you really think about high school that way, I think you'll definitely have no problem in overcoming all obstacles and yeah, that's essentially all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jolene. I will definitely take that as a sign to step out of my own comfort zone. Okay, so our second guest speaker today is Isabel Boone. Isabel Boone is a rising sophomore studying health and human biology at Brown University. Her hobbies include reading, playing piano, and swimming. Take it away, Isabel.
Hey everyone, give me a second while I share my screen. Oh, and feel free to stop me if you have any questions, just raise your hand on Zoom or something and I'll answer it. Um, Okay, I titled my presentation "The Pre-Med Life" in quotation marks because I still feel like I'm still not sure whether or not I want to be a doctor or not, but this is the path I'm on since high school, and I think I'm going to try to continue it the best I can. And if all else fails, I'll do public health. So the format of my slides is a bit similar to Jolene's. I'm gonna first talk about my high school experiences and how that led me to my further decisions for college applications and further on. But let's start with freshman year. So freshman year, I was basically totally in person until March, where school got cut short by COVID. So I think this whole experience in general made a great impact in what I decided to pursue. And so I joined Marquette HOSA, which is the Health Occupation Students of America, United Sciences, and a bunch of other clubs at first. There were so many clubs. I remember at Club Rush that like there were so many to pick from. And I just remember that everyone wanted to join CSF, NHS, FBLA, all these popular volunteer organizations. And I was considering it at first, but then I sort of realized that most people were doing this. So unless I was dead set on getting some sort of leadership position in these clubs, I felt that it wasn't that important for me to join it because I wouldn't be able to make a difference compared to other clubs I could join. And so I would stress that when you're finding clubs to join, find clubs that you can have impact with, and quantity is not as important as quality, in my opinion. If you're trying to join like a lot, but you're just a member in all of them, it's not as good as if you have leadership roles in a few. And also remember that just because like a lot of people are joining stuff doesn't mean that you also have to. Try to find stuff that you yourself personally enjoy, and I think that that's how you'll make the most of high school. So I was very indecisive in freshman year. So I feel like I had some interest in science from middle school. I did typical stuff like math field day, science field day, which were middle school competitions that I really enjoyed. And so I felt that I could really pursue my interest in medicine. But I also really like history. In comparison to Jolene. And I wasn't sure how I would factor this into my high school life and how I would also try to pursue this. So later on, you'll see how I try to insert that into my life. So other things I did during my freshman year, I volunteered at my dad's clinic on Saturdays. So my dad's a family doctor, and that's one of the reasons why I decided that I wanted to try to pursue becoming a family doctor, because I feel like they're the closest to everyday patients that you see, and I feel like I could make the most impact to my community through becoming a family doctor. So freshman year, I also really loved my classes, and I think for me, I love STEM and the humanities equally, so it was really hard for me to choose which one I wanted to gear myself toward more. Um, but everything got cut short by COVID. So I did join Skills USA, which is more focused toward trade school stuff like wood tech. But one of my teachers had told me to join a short public speaking competition in there. And so we advanced to state, but because of COVID, we weren't able to compete. And if COVID hadn't happened, who knows how different my high school journey would have been. I might have continued to do more Skills USA, but because it happened, here I am now. Some other things that COVID cut short were swim season, so I wasn't able to do one full season of swim, which was kind of sad. And I was also trying to prepare for Science Bowl with United Sciences, but that was also cut short because of COVID. So all those weekends going to the library, practicing science questions were all cut short. And so because this was COVID, very confusing time, I basically didn't have that much to do during the summer. And so my mom was like, you should do something, take summer school. So like a lot of other people in my year, I decided to take World History Summer School on Zoom. I actually really wanted to take World History AP, but I guess because I wasn't really doing that much during the summer, I just chose to do summer school instead. And it turns out my teacher was awesome. I learned so much from her, and even though it was online, I still felt like her passion was oozing through the screen. So I really love that. But I do kind of regret that I wasn't able to take the AP class. Other things I did during the summer, I applied to Markeppel HOSA board and I started my Bookstagram. So Bookstagram is like an Instagram you create where you post books that you read and make it very pretty, take pretty pictures and share with everyone else what you're reading. So that was basically my freshman year, very chill. I don't think I was doing too much, but it was still very fun. My sophomore year was completely online, so we were in the deep trenches of the pandemic at this time. So I had no swim or water polo, which was very sad because we had to go through Zoom doing practice, which basically consisted of us doing online workout videos in front of the camera. But during this time, I also became HOSA treasurer, which, as Jolene said, gave me a leadership position to try to help me develop leadership skills, and also it helped me work well with other people and organize events that a lot of high schoolers could go to. So actually helped us get a little bit more connected during the Zoom classes. So I did start working with AYA and I organized different fundraisers, for example, for Concern Foundation, which also raises money for cancer. And I also raised money for HOSA competitions, which I wasn't able to personally participate in, but a lot of my classmates were. And so we needed to pay fees for them to compete, even though it was still online. I also took physics, which was not the best idea because I felt like my math skills were not high enough. I hadn't taken accelerated math 3, or I feel like calculus would have been very useful. But it did make me really rethink whether or not I wanted to be pre-med or not, because I think that was like the first class where I was staying up late trying to complete problem sets, and I was very confused. I did not like physics. But I think in the end, it was a really good learning experience because it taught me that I needed to actually find a way to study well. And also kind of taught me that I like biology and chemistry a lot more than physics. So that's what I decided to pursue later on. And then so I continued doing my Bookstagram. So as you can see here, I have a bunch of, or that's a screenshot of things that I posted during the pandemic where I had a lot of time to do stuff. And I think I also did a lot of online searching about college applications. So as you can see, I was like very confused during this time. I didn't really know what college applications were or what to do. So during this time, I was reading a lot of college application essays, which I feel like really helped later on because I kind of got a sense of how college essays were supposed to sound like and how to like parse out good essays from bad ones and also find my voice through writing. So I also did this reflections writing contest, which was organized through my school, but I think it's also a statewide thing. So I was able to win like a $30 check, which was very nice. But that was also one of the ways I tried to pursue my interests outside of STEM. So during that summer, I also took AP US History online. Don't get me wrong, I really love history, but again, I was lacking in things to do during the summer, so I decided to do this. It was also very helpful because this course forced you to write a lot of essays. And I feel like even though I didn't get the in-person version of writing a lot of DBQs for AP US History, um, learning how to churn out essays very quickly was very helpful in preparing for AP Lang, I feel like. Another thing I did during that summer was I did Camp Mishawaka, which was basically this 2-week outdoor camp, summer camp that my dad wanted me and my brother to go to. Honestly, it was just a very like non-stressful time. So I was just out in the woods playing without electronics, and I feel like that was a good way to de-stress over the summer. And during the summer, I also started applying to make Historia into a club. So my friend from South Pasadena High School had asked me if I wanted to create or help start another chapter of her history club. And of course I said yes, because I love history. So I decided to make this a reality by applying to make Historia a club at Markeppel. And ultimately, I was able to make it happen. And Historia is a nonprofit focused on the study of ethnic studies. And we thought this was really important because California is now making ethnic studies a high school graduation requirement. I think it's for the class of 2026. But I thought that that was a good way to start to introduce the topic to my fellow classmates, and also to try to do some other history stuff on the side of all the STEM stuff I was doing. So I started that club with my friend, and it turns out that the friend who told me to create the chapter of this club ended up not really doing the club, so we were basically like the main chapter, and that was pretty nice. So in junior year, we were back to school in person, which was really, really fun. And applied to a lot of club boards again, so I started to have higher positions. My main ones were being the vice president of HOSA and president of Historia. There were quite a few other ones, but I feel like they weren't as relevant. Other things that I decided to do were do Science Olympiad. So Science Olympiad at this time, it was still online because we weren't fully out of the pandemic yet, but going to after school practices with my AP chemistry teacher really helped me get closer to this teacher. And later on, I would ask her for a letter of rec. I was also able to bond with a lot of my classmates, so that was also very fun. It was also my first time taking APs because I wasn't able to take AP World History in sophomore year. So I took AP English Language, AP Chinese, and AP Chemistry. Sorry, that's my stretch break. How do I go back? Yep. And I also took choir, which was a very interesting choice, but I did have to take it because of our visual and performing arts requirement. And it was also a very stress-free class, so I was just using it to do homework and practice piano. So that was my fun class. And I guess my other fun class is swim, but I took swim every year of high school. So junior year, I also had my first full swim season and I wasn't playing water polo anymore. But this was really fun as I actually got to bond with my teammates in person instead of not really knowing anyone through Zoom. Another highlight of my junior year, I decided to take this spring break educational trip with my, oh, she's not in this picture, but I decided to take this trip with my freshman English teacher, who I'm still very close to, and a bunch of our other classmates. And we went to France and Spain, and I felt like that was a really cool experience that I could have talked about in my college essays, but I actually did not end up talking about that. But nevertheless, it was postponed because of COVID, and we were finally able to go on that trip. So I thought that was really fun. And as Jolene said, I also did Distinguished Young Women. It's like this, yeah, scholarship competition where you can earn money through having a variety of skills such as interviews, academics, personal talents, which I played piano for. And I ended up being like a finalist or something, but from them I did get a small check for college scholarship purposes. And then that summer, I went to the summer science program at Purdue University. So this was a summer program that I applied to during junior year before the summer. I actually applied to a lot of programs, and this was the only one that finally accepted me after waitlist. So don't be discouraged if you aren't accepted like the first time. You have like many other chances with other programs. But this was my first exposure to research, and I was able to meet so many different people from around the world. This girl is from Greece, and that was my first time doing biochemistry stuff, and it opened me up to so much more. I felt like the stuff I learned in school was nothing compared to this. Biochem was so much harder than I thought. And what we did in this program was we were making a fungicide for a citrus fungus, which sounds like nothing to do with pre-med, but it was some research experience nonetheless, and I was able to do a lot of wet lab stuff and make bacteria. So that was very fun. And then because I was in this program for the majority of my summer, I didn't have that much time for college apps, which I kind of regret because, like Jolene said, starting college apps in the summer is like really useful, and it relieves a lot of stress during senior year. But nonetheless, I entered senior year, and I feel like that was the most fun. I mean, I was still taking AP classes, but I was doing a lot of stuff that I loved, and I was in bigger leadership positions, so I felt like I had more impact on the stuff I was working with. And so I took AP English Lit, AP Calc, and AP Bio. And actually that summer program helped me a lot with AP Bio. I felt like I I don't know, that class was very easy to me after the summer program. But the highlight of my senior year in terms of classes was physiology, because I got to do a lot of different labs. As you can see, I think, sorry for the gore, but this is a fetal pig, and I think this is a sheep's heart, and we were able to do a lot of different dissections, and I think this is a cow's eye. So I mean, that was another one of the experiences that made me think that maybe I could be a doctor and maybe I could be pre-med. And it's not so bad, even if I don't like physics. So other than that, I moved on to varsity swim. I became president of HOSA, and I continued on as Historia president. And I was able to do a lot of stuff in terms of organizing webinars, creating more fundraisers, and basically running the things that I had been involved with since very early on. I also joined Crown and Scepter Honor Society. Basically, there was a lot of other stuff that I did, but I felt like it wasn't as important as these few. But this honor society was really fun. I just felt the need to mention it because I was able to do some environmental science stuff, and I thought that was really interesting because I wasn't able to explore that through classes. Wasn't able to take APES. And then senior year, we were finally able to compete in person for Science Olympiad, which was very sad because we almost made it to state. But I also did a bunch of college visit days after applications, which will be on my next slide. But this is me at Cal Day with Oski. I was at UCLA, Bruin or Bust. And what else? Oh, wait, this is Brown, and it's actually this is actually the classroom that I took chemistry and organic chemistry in this past year. So yeah, I did not know that when I went, but it was very fun. And I would really recommend going to college visit days when you have the chance, because I feel like compared to just visiting schools, there's such a fun way to learn about the school that you've been already accepted to instead of what you haven't gotten into yet. And I feel like it did help me decide where I wanted to go later on. So this slide is all about college apps. I don't have too much to put because I feel like Jolene did cover a lot, so I'll just go over some things that I thought were pretty useful. So for essays, I applied to both privates and public schools. So therefore I had personal statements as well as other supplemental essays for other privates. UC applications consisted of 4 essays, I think. And basically my tip is to start early, and looking back, I should have created more stricter schedules and deadlines because I was kind of going with the flow, and I would set fake deadlines, but I wouldn't meet them, and I would just keep dragging on. But honestly, setting deadlines is the way to go because you're able to go through more revisions and make your essays sound better and as good as they could. So other essay tips I would say are specificity is key. So always include details in your essays. You don't want to just gloss over what you did. You want to let the admissions person know exactly what you did and how you did it, who, what, when, where, why, how. Show not tell. Don't just like tell people what you did. Add lots of sensory details so they feel like they're in the moment with you. And that sort of leads me to snapshot moment, which is I guess this tip that I use for starting a lot of my essays, where I would basically add a bunch of details that showed me in the moment of whatever experience I was talking about, and that was, I feel like it was very helpful to make the reader get a sense of how I was feeling and how I felt during that experience in that specific moment in time. And I feel like that just makes it a lot more personal instead of starting the essay with during the summer I did this. So in terms of revisions, I didn't ask too many people to look at my essays because I was dead set on making it very private and doing it all on my own. So I ended up just showing my essays to one teacher, one of my friends, and then I think one more teacher, but that was it. And then I also had a mentor from my summer program, and she was really helpful. She was telling me a bunch of this stuff that I would not have guessed at myself. And yeah, I think like Jolene said, you don't have to take everyone's revisions, just take them with a grain of salt. But most people want to do you good. And so I would say that try to not let too many people read your essays, because then you have to go through too many revisions, and then at the end it's like sort of wasting your time and also taking away from your voice. But also like only show it to people who you really trust. And I felt like even though I was trying to make my essays as private as possible, that sort of helped me in a way because I was able to maintain my voice throughout. And I feel like that really helped me. In terms of letters of rec, I asked the teacher I went to the spring break trip with, because I did get closer to her during that trip. And I also asked my AP chemistry teacher for my main high school teacher, letters of rec. And I think College Essay Guy was a really important resource for me in terms of how to approach college essays, because there were a bunch of essays on that website I could look at as examples, and you can see how other people wrote them, how what tricks they used to like try to make their essays sound more personal. I think it was a really good resource for me when I was trying to just do everything myself without the help of other people. In terms of majors and schools, I was pretty set on not applying as a general biology major, but because most of my extracurriculars were geared towards STEM, I knew that it would make more sense for me to apply as STEM. So for most of my schools, I think I did some specific sort of biology. I think for UCLA, I applied as psychobio, and for Berkeley, I did molecular environmental biology. So basically stuff that was more like focused in bio rather than general. I don't know if this is true. This is just like what I personally thought, but I thought that choosing something more specific would show that like I had more passion instead of just choosing something general that like anyone could choose. My last thing that, looking back, I should have done was apply to less schools. I feel like application fees are really expensive, and if like you think that you don't want to go to a school but you're just applying for it for the fun of it, it's really not worth like spending $80 just to apply and get a decision letter that you're not even going to go to. So I probably would have crossed a few more schools off my list so that I could focus more time on the schools that I really wanted to get into. I also wanted to recommend this book, which is called Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be by Frank Bruni. It sounds really preachy from the title, but I really like this book and I read it during my junior year summer. It kind of made me a lot less stressed about college apps because like it's like basically what the title is saying and talking about a lot of success stories from different people who didn't go to like top ranked schools. And yeah, I feel like this book is just a very nice de-stressor in this very stressful time in your high school life. So yeah, I would really recommend that anyone who's going through the process or going to go through the process read this book. It really makes you feel a lot better that like your college application does not determine your worth and where you go does not determine your worth. I know like people are really stressed about getting into top schools or like getting into a good college, but as long as you try your best and you're not slacking off, you should do fine. So these are my more general high school reflections. I guess during the summer I tried to pursue like a lot of learning experiences. Um, I think my biggest one was summer science program because that was the first time I got to experience research in person and build relationships with other high school students from around the country. But I just feel like summer, like it doesn't really have to be a summer program as long as you're doing something where you can learn something from and build character. I feel like that's the most important thing. Because like you're not just doing this for college, you're doing this for your own growth later on, whether it be getting a job or becoming a lifeguard at the pool. Any of these skills can be applied to what you do later on. And for me, senioritis did not really manifest like I thought it would. I know a lot of my friends were starting to slack off in senior year because they felt like, oh, it's like almost over, so I can like be lazy now. But for me, I still really liked school, but I was really lazy about scholarship applications, which I feel like in hindsight, I really regret because I could have applied to a lot more and gotten more money than the ones that I already had. So I applied to the Edison Scholars. So I got like a smaller check for that, and then Distinguished Young Woman also gave me a little bit more money. But honestly, college tuition is so expensive and there are so many scholarships out there. So just send as many applications as you can and get as much money as you can. Especially for if you need financial or if you get need-based aid, it's a lot more than merit-based aid. And in terms of college decisions, by the time I was done with the process, I had applied to USC Early Action and I got rejected, which is sad. But I think I would have, again, like I should have actually made a better schedule so that I could apply to like the stuff that I really wanted to. And then after May 1st, I had committed to UCLA. And it was like very annoying because I was choosing between UCLA and Berkeley, and I hadn't gotten my waitlist from Brown yet. So I submitted my deposit for UCLA, and I really thought I was going to UCLA until somewhere in the middle of May, I got a waitlist decision from Brown, and yeah, I went to visit the school, and that was that. So I feel like in terms of college decisions, visiting the school during their visitation day was the most important thing for me, because for me, I didn't do any college tours beforehand, and I feel like they don't make that much of a difference because like random things like the weather could influence whether or not you like the school. So going there where they're actually like trying to make you come to the school is much better in my opinion. And I guess in terms of deciding between UCLA and Berkeley, back when I was still trying to decide between that, Berkeley was farther away than from home, and I know my family wanted me to stay closer to home, so I felt like UCLA was the better choice for me, even though I really, really liked Berkeley. But after I got into Brown, I was like rethinking everything because I was like, oh, I chose home the first time, so what do I want to choose now? And in the end, I chose the move to the other side of the country, and I think I'm very happy with that. So, in terms of what to do during high school, I just think that like you should pursue what you love, and if you're not pursuing something that you really like, it's not worth it to continue doing because it probably won't show up as passion in your essays when you're applying to college. And in terms of other random stuff, I wish I did take more pictures to remember my high school experience. Because making these slides, I was looking for pictures my freshman and sophomore year, and I realized that I didn't really have any. So yeah, make memories with your friends, but also make sure that you're trying to make the biggest impact you can. And then my last slide is basically my freshman year of college. I had a lot of fun doing pre-med stuff, but also a lot of living on my own. I joined so many clubs, which is like counterintuitive to what I said for high school, but I was really trying to join all the fun clubs and try to pick apart which one I wanted to stay in, and which one I thought that I had a chance of a leadership role in. But there were also a lot of cool school events that I went to. Here I went to this two of these lectures. I was able to listen to the former Senator Liz Cheney speak and also the former president of New Zealand speak, and I thought that was so cool. So I feel like I've been pursuing so many of my other interests in college. And besides that, I've been doing the typical pre-med classes, so organic chemistry, and I realized that compared to high school, you really need to I really needed to fix my study habits. So yeah, in terms of college, feel like it was a much bigger change compared to high school. And then I was just doing a lot of fun stuff. I feel like freshman year is very chill. I was still trying to find what I really wanted to do, but in the end, I was able to make the most of it. And so this summer, I'm doing some public health research as well as volunteering at a hospital in July and August, and I'll be doing research at KGI, which is the Keck Graduate Institute. But yeah, that's all I have for now. My throat is very raspy, and I will let Catherine speak for the next.
Thank you, Isabel. So our third and last guest speaker today is Catherine Ponton. Catherine Ponton is a fourth-year medical student at Keck School of Medicine in the MD MPH program. She was originally from Gambia, West Africa, went to Mercer University in Georgia for undergrad, and moved here to LA for medical school. Her specialty interests are internal medicine and family medicine. Her older brother was an AYA, so she has a personal interest in this program and population. I'll go ahead and pass it off to Catherine now.
Sorry, there goes my mute. Okay, I promise I will try not to take too much more of your time. So like, please be awake and engaged for this like final stretch. Right here, I think on everyone's screen, you can see a poll that we've gotten done up. Like you can just take your time and go through this poll. You don't have to answer it all right now, but like as we go along the presentation, just like run through and answer them, and then we can look at some of the results at the end and kind of like go over those while we like think about questions and stuff. Also, I want to keep this really informal and open. I have ADHD, so I know sometimes I struggle with like keeping things in my head and then paying attention to them later. So if you have any like burning questions or like important questions that come up, just ask. You do not have to like, wait or anything, because I know that's how that can be sometimes even for myself. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Shoot, I don't think I have access. Sorry. There you go. I should be a co-host now, and I will share. Okay, hopefully you guys are able to see. There we go. All right, so this is me. My name is Catherine. As you probably already guessed, and this is just kind of like a brief about me section, so you can kind of get to know like me as a person, like what I'm about. Nice to meet everybody here, even though I can't see most of you. Here's some like general timeline stuff about me. So I was born like 10,000 years ago in 97. I grew up in the Gambia, which is in West Africa. So it's like a tiny country on the West Coast. I graduated high school in 2015. That's like an old picture of me and some of my friends. I graduated university in 2019. I went to Mercer University, which is a school in Middle Georgia. And then I did a gap year between undergrad and med school, and then I started med school in 2020. So
Sorry,
something.
Catherine.
Oh,
For some reason, the slides are not progressing.
oh, I don't know why that is happening. Okay, I will share. Hold on a second. A different screen.
Oh, I did the fourth one, so I think it should be okay.
Sorry, I will correct that. You guys hopefully are filling out that flyer or the poll while this is happening. Okay. So now I will just share the actual like present screen and not presenter view. So I'm just gonna make this screen. So hopefully you guys can see everything. You should be on like a slide with all the pictures. You can give me a thumbs up or like a nod just so that you guys are like where you should be. All right. So one of the things I like to do just about me is like travel. So some of my travel goals this year and next year is to go to Switzerland. One of my friends lives there and she's having a baby, so so I want to go. Greece because another friend lives there, and then Japan and South Korea to visit some of my other friends. And another thing about me is I love to cook, which is something that I enjoy. Like I've always enjoyed doing. It's really fun, and you can always drop in the chat if there's anything you guys particularly like to cook or like to make, like interesting about yourselves. And so, okay, now for the main content that you're here for. What I'm going to go through is kind of briefly the pre-med college application, the pre-med experience whilst in college, gap year considerations, and then the med school application process. And I just want to say, like, don't get bogged down and like stuck on the details. This is just kind of like a standard outline as to like what people generally give you advice to do. But I didn't even do all of these things, so like don't be like discouraged or overwhelmed as we go through this. Just kind of like take it as it goes, and hopefully you leave this with feeling encouraged. So one thing to do with pre-med is, choosing the right undergrad institution, right? Like one of the questions in the poll is kind of like, you have a dream school or where you want to go. And I think the school you go to definitely helps you a lot and can be a big factor. I think the most important thing, people think about research and science departments, but even more important than that, I think, is having good pre-med advising and mentorship, because you could go to a really good school, but if they don't actually tell you about the things or help you, you could end up getting lost anyway. like I said, I'm from West Africa. I'm first gen. I had no idea about a lot of things. So I really needed people who weren't like my parents and stuff, who could actually tell me like what I should be doing, what I should be looking for, or like help me understand what I was dealing with. And those people will really help you figure out like, hey, this is what you should do, this is where you should go. And it'd be really, really key in just like your whole journey. Another thing is, of course, GPA, standardized test scores, and extracurriculars. Very briefly, we kind of already know those things that we're supposed to do, but I would say, take all of it with a grain of salt. Of course, you want to have like good scores are just going to be like door openers, right? It's not the end of the world, but it'll just help you have more options. And so just think about it that way. Don't think about it as like this is the end all be all. It's just kind of making yourself have more options and lanes. And when it comes to extracurriculars, you can kind of do whatever you want. Like one thing that I know for sure is that it doesn't matter what you're doing, as long as you're doing it well. And if you actually enjoy what you're doing, you're going to be able to spin it anyway. Like you can totally do no science stuff at all in high school. Like I did school band, and not even like trumpet, violin band. It was like guitar, drums, piano band. And like I really liked that, and it was really fun. And it's like any of those things where you're engaging people, right? When you do band, you're dealing with different crowds, you're understanding how to perform in front of people. Like those are still skills that you can use in an application that applies to like medicine and science. It doesn't have to be like within this certain box, right? And then demonstrating interest in medicine and science in general, if that's what you're going to go into. So that can be shadowing, it can be health related programs, it can be community service. And more than doing something for the sake of doing it for your application, this stuff is really helpful to you as an individual. I know a lot of us think about like, what do I want to do with my life? It's like a huge question. So take more of these opportunities of less than like, let me check a box, and more like, let me see if I actually want to do this with my life. Like shadowing a doctor will really tell you like, man, maybe this is not what I thought it was, and I actually don't want to do this. And now you have like a lot more time to think about what you do want to do. And it could also just kind of tell you, I really don't want to do optometry, or like, wow, pediatrician is crazy. I don't like being around kids. And that'll like help you out yourself. So try to pick stuff that is going to be helpful to you as well to making your decision, and not just, for the sake of doing something that might look nice. Another thing to think about, of course, is like academics during like the pre-med college experience. So this is like once you're in school, you want to maintain your like grade point average in general, especially in science courses. If you're going to apply into the medicine like fields, like those classes are especially, because they're going to come back to bite you in the butt later, especially if you're doing the MCAT. I learned that because I flushed all of my biochem knowledge after taking it, and then when I had to relearn biochem for the MCAT, I was like, oh god, I should have just kept that in my brain. And then, of course, you don't actually have to take those courses. You don't have to be a biology major. I was a double major in English. When I applied, I actually applied undecided because I wasn't 100%, even though like I kind of thought it was, but I wasn't sure. So you don't have to do like strictly bio related classes. I have a lot of people who are in med school who are my classmates who did something completely different. Like I have journalism friends who did all journalism stuff, but they just took the prerequisite courses like biochem, chemistry on the side without having to major in those things, right? So if you don't really like those courses, but you like health science in general, that might be the way to go, is to pick something else, but then just do the prerequisite courses. Getting experience when you're in college. So if you don't have those opportunities in high school, because that's real life, sometimes we don't live in an area, we just don't have the connections, you can always try to do things in college as well. So those clinical experiences, research, if you don't get that much research opportunities, like it's also not the end of the world. You can do research in different kinds of things. I think I did animal biology research, which is like nothing to do with health, but like it was always funny to talk to interviewers because they're like, you did research on squirrels? And I was like, yep, I did research where I was chasing squirrels around on campus. And then they just find that funny and they laugh at it. And they're like, probably going to remember me more than like the 1,000th person that talks about like, something fancy. They're just like that girl who got like acorns thrown at her, like what a gag. So like just kind of keep your mind open to like the opportunities. It doesn't have to be, once again, in like a box, right? Joining pre-medical educations, I put not needed there because I was one of those kind of like not normal pre-meds who was just like everything pre-med just made me feel like, oh god, I don't want to deal with this stuff. And like, sometimes you don't fit into like the regular box of other pre-meds. Maybe you don't really get along with everybody. Sometimes it's almost like there's this personality type you have to be in this space, and like that's not true. You don't have to be a specific type of person. And if you feel uncomfortable, you can just leave, which is what I did. So like, I had mentorship. Most of my friends were like non-pre-med people. Even when I did my interview here at USC, where I go to med school, they straight up asked like, what did you feel about pre-meds at your school? And I was like, I don't really like them. We didn't really hang out. And it wasn't the end of the world. It can be really beneficial to have people in the same, lane as you, because, you can help each other. You guys can network. You guys can help build each other up. But if that's not the experience you're having, don't feel bad about moving somewhere else. You can always learn something from other people, people who are English majors, sociology majors. So like, don't box yourself in on campus either, and just like stay in your lane. Leadership roles in clubs or student government. This is a plus, but it's once again not the end of the world. You can do leadership in so many different ways, right? I was an anime club, and that was a leadership role. It's one of those things that just helps you learn those responsibilities. And this is stuff you're just going to replicate when you go to med school. So it kind of helps you get ready for those things in med school, because you're going to be doing it all over again, essentially. Same thing with community service and outreach. A lot of schools have lots of opportunities. So just like get out there, see what's available. Things like even helping with move-in day, it can be as little as that, as long as you're like impacting people and you can share that, it works out. So another thing to do is building relationships. This is a really big one. I picked a smaller school. So the school I went to was like not super big, but not super tiny. It was about mid-size. So I picked it specifically because, I didn't want to be in an auditorium where the teacher can never even see you. And you guys can't even see all your classmates because there's like 10,000 of you sitting in one room. But being able to actually like be in the front of the classroom, or just email the professors or ask them questions, like even if you don't have any real questions, like just ask interested, because it just kind of opened the door to having them get to know you. And then when you have to ask for help or ask for letters of recommendation, it's just that much easier because they actually know who you are. If there's office hours, just go to the office hours, even if you don't really need to go to the office hours, just to kind of build a rapport with your professors. And, like I said, once again, if you're someone who doesn't have like parents who are in medicine, or who doesn't have like background or advisors or mentorships, like these people can be really helpful to you. And also for when you're struggling, because everybody struggles, I struggle, we all struggle. And sometimes just having a nice relationship with the professor can be a difference in whether you fail or pass. Right? Like someone, you could go and ask a professor, can I get an extension? Or if your grade is like, on a curve or something, and if they've never met you before, they can be like, I don't even know who you are, please get out of my office. Or they can be like, what, I've seen this person like for 6 months, they're a nice kid, why not help them out? So you can always think about it as not just, you getting to know someone for whatever reason. You never know what could happen, and this person could help you out in some other situation as well. And then of course there's the MCAT, dun dun dun. It's like standardized test, everyone's least favorite thing. Definitely my least favorite thing. I would say, starting from now, when you're getting ready for your SAT experience, like use that experience, because all standardized tests kind of work the same way. So even if it's like the SAT, the MCAT, when you're in med school, you're taking step 1, step 2, step 3, like they all kind of function similarly. It's like you're going to be in a room with a computer, it's multiple choice, it's timed, like it's the same kind of feeling. And so if you go through your SAT experience and you kind of know that I really have a hard time like sitting in one spot for this long, like that's probably not going to change. No matter how many years go by, you're probably still going to have that same issue with the same standardized test. So when you go through this experience with your SATs, I would say like take notes on like how you're feeling. Like even if it's just like a journal of like, I really hate this experience, it's really stressful, that might help you. Like, Jolene mentioned in thinking, man, I really don't want to take another standardized test like this because it was such a bad experience for me. Maybe I'm going to look for the programs that help me not have to take that again. Or it might tell you like, I don't want to go down a career path that makes me take a lot of standardized tests, and kind of, it could be helpful in the sense of, for me, I know I had a problem with time. I've always had a problem with time since I was a kid. So when I did my SATs, I was like, man, I really need to figure out a strategy that helps me with time. And I literally have used that strategy for like over 10 years every time I take a standardized test, because I have like I'm the same person, so I'm experiencing the same issues. And because I already know how I dealt with it the last time, I had these little timetables I make for myself. I don't have to start from scratch every time I have to take a big test. Like, can help you in any test you take. It's just like, okay, I know what I sucked at before, and now I can use my previous experience to say, this is what I'm going to do this time, so I don't start from scratch all over again, learning my mistakes. And like, of course, the other thing is use prep courses and practice exams. Some of those can be really expensive, so I know it can be like scary, but there's a lot of free resources online. Of course, there's also people around you. So if you have someone who's in the year above you who took a test and they have like those extra workbooks, like ask people for their extra workbooks, or if they're graduating, you can ask people for those as well. So like, it doesn't always have to be super like, you can't afford to buy something. All right, so thinking about taking gap year. So if you plan to take a gap year, I've know people who take a gap year after high school, even like they don't just go straight to college. I know someone right now who's starting residency who took a gap year after high school, and they decided to take like a couple years off before starting university. They went to community college. So there's a lot of different places you can take a gap year. There's a lot of different reasons you can take a gap year. You can even take a gap year during university, like you start school, do a few years, take a break, and then come back. But some of the reasons people take gap year traditionally is to make their application better. So if you feel like you didn't have a lot of opportunities, or you want to go to a specific school and they need things from you, you want to take a year off to really like build yourself up, right? Like get some experience, do some more things, maybe retake some standardized tests, right? Maybe get a different degree. And then also maybe to think things over. If you're in a space where you're like, I'm really unsure about what I want to do, maybe instead of committing to something, you want to take a gap year to actually explore your options, right? So maybe do something like Peace Corps, something health related if you're thinking about healthcare, because then you get to actually do a year-long experience with it, and that will help you figure out, do I want to do this or not? Or do I want to do something else? Maybe do that other thing. So like, if you really like music or English, maybe do like a music degree for like 1 year and see what that does for you. And then you can always be more sure moving forward in the future. One thing you can do in a gap year, if you want to do something healthcare based, is to do a job in a healthcare setting. I said, once again, that's not required. Like I said, there's people who did photography. Like I said, I had a friend who did photography. I had a friend who was a war journalist. I didn't actually do any of those things. I wanted to do a healthcare job and I applied to some, but I ended up being a nanny for 1 year. And that was like completely different than what people tell you to do. And actually, my boss, who I was a nanny for, wrote me one of my letters of recommendation. And that was one of the things that made me stand out, right? Doing something like childcare, I could kind of use that in my application of just like, being able to take care of people, maybe wanting to do pediatrics, right? Having experience actually dealing with a real life baby was something that I could use as an example that was like worthwhile. So you don't actually have to stick to the traditional route, but if you do, like I said, for healthcare, volunteering, medical missions, if you want to do research or work in a research lab as an intern or do something completely different. I knew someone who literally was a pop star for a few years before they went to medical school, and then they were like, I'm done being a pop star, I want to do medicine, and decided to like apply later on. Right. And so thinking about reasons why it's for you, you can assess whether you're ready or not to start the next journey. And so you want to take a gap year, think about financial reasons. A lot of people who, like I said, if you don't come from a background that has a lot of like support or money, sometimes people take a break so they can work before starting school because it is expensive. College and med school are both pretty expensive, right? And sometimes you want to take a break to save up some cash so that you can use that during your time in school, or maybe save up for like applications and other things just to set yourself up. So sometimes that's something you can do. And then also when you think about your long-term career goals, is there something that you can do in this time now that you actually feel like having this time before will help you out with it? Getting a master's degree, if you want to do something like, I don't know, like, holistic teaching. So like if you want to do music and like med school, you might want to do something where you do like integrative care. You can just do both of those things, and that gap year will be a lot more meaningful to you. You can be kind of whatever you want to do. And then when it comes to the med school application process, it's pretty similar, I would say, to the college application process. So like, once again, just like standardized tests, there's a lot of the same stuff. Application processes, you're going to see a lot of the same stuff. So like if you have trouble with something in your high school, college, scholarship applications, it's going to be the same issues probably coming up the next time. So you kind of have like the AMCAS, which is like the kind of common app version for the med schools. Early submission also is really helpful when it comes to med school applications, because it really is, some schools are just let you in as they see people. You need your GPA transcripts, your standardized test scores, personal statements, and letters of rec. So like all stuff you've heard about before, nothing like new or scary. So you don't have to let that like deter you. And then of course, all of the others have mentioned personal statements. You want it to be compelling and highlight your experiences and motivations, right? Like it doesn't have to be anything that was like too, oh, I have to make myself sound a certain way. Like it can be really about myself. Similar to Isabel, I didn't have a lot of input when I wrote mine. I did mostly myself, and I kind of kept it like to who I was. Like I talked about my background. You know, if I'm a jokey, goofy person, I was like, it's fair for me to be a little unserious in my applications because that's how I am as a person. So like I mentioned how I used to like the way Kim Possible. If any of you guys have ever seen Kim Possible, because it's been so long. And, it was like a show on Disney Channel. I mentioned like her mom was a doctor. I thought that was cool. So I was like, hey, like that's something that might not make sense to someone else's professional, but like me being the person I am, I thought to myself, if I put myself out there in this application, when they accept me, that means they're going to accept me for who I am, right? So if I go to this school and I act this way, they're not going to be like, oh my God, like this is crazy, because they knew that before they let me in. So now that they've let me in, they actually are like a place where they'll allow me to be myself, right? And then, of course, there's like secondary applications. So similar to Isabel and Jolene, these are kind of like the next round, and you can really reuse your essay. So same thing with the scholarships. You're going to have the same questions pop up for all of these different schools. So you can really recycle and reuse different things or chop different ones up and put them back together. So like that'll help you, writing those things out in advance. And like don't like write something and then throw it away. And you're like, oh gosh, where is that essay file? Just like save them all in one folder or something like that. So just like catalog folder essays and just save them all in one place so you can go back easily and like use those. And then you have interviews. So you've got traditional interviews where they have you talking to someone straight up, which is once you get to an interview process, there's literally not much you can do to mess up. So even with college applications, do not be scared of interviews. Please, they've already picked you, they already like you, and you don't have to panic too much. If you go and, it literally would take a disaster for you not to like you. Like most of the time, it's better than you think it is. You don't have to stress out too much because, sometimes that might come off as well. And then you have MMI styles where they give you these weird questions and scenarios. I hate MMI style questions about interviews, but it's something that a few schools do. One thing that you can do is prepare for questions. So this is going to help you with med school and college, right? Like if you don't know anything about the school, that might not be the best. So like maybe the night before, just think about like what questions are they going to ask me? Just do some like research about the school itself and some things that you care about. Also, one of the best way to avoid answering questions is asking questions. So go prepared to ask questions yourself, you know what I mean? And make that part of the conversation as well. Because you can tell I'm a yapper, so this helps me a lot because I just end up asking them and talking most of the time. So they're like, what were we talking about? And I was like, nothing. We were talking about everything. And they'll just remember that we talked a lot, essentially. Other things is stay organized with deadlines, like Isabel said, get feedback from advisors and peers, like people who know you. Like that's an important part, is like trying to get advisors who actually know who you are as well. So they're not just giving you generic advice. They actually know like this is the kind of person this person is, like this is how they, would want to be. And like be authentic and reflective in all of your application parts. Like I said, I think one thing that I definitely tried to do was say, who am I? What do I want? Like, I'm not going to apply somewhere just for the sake of it. I'm going to think, do I actually want to go there, right? Like, why waste your time and other people's time by just trying to fit into a place where you don't even want to go? You don't want to be there. You don't feel like they're going to accept you for, and I'm, of course, being very general, like, there's the reality, but just generally, like, don't try to force yourself to be in a certain position, because then you're going to end up being somewhere and it's like, now I have to be a whole different person, right? And yeah, so thank you for like listening to my spiel. I'm Catherine. This is my email, patin@usc.edu. So if you want to reach out to me just to like ask questions personally about USC, about med school, and all those other things, feel free to do that. And I'm gonna stop sharing so she can share the poll results if that's possible. And
Thank
also,
you.
open up the room for anyone to ask any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Catherine. Now we remember the squirrel and the acorns too. It's really great that all three speakers are really sharing your personal, stories and your passion, make it so unique who you are. And everyone will have their own paths to go, but we all appreciate your passion, your dedication to pursue healthcare, to serve more people and have an impact. Is everyone seeing my screen now with the poll?
No.
No. Okay.
However, I did see a question while you do that, Shu, from Bless Bangit. Hopefully I'm saying this right. Is it possible to be a professor and a doctor at the same time? Yes, totally. I think most of the doctors work here. So USC is an academic center, right? So you have a med school and a, university and a hospital together. And a lot of those programs, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to be a professor and a doctor at the same time, right? Because you're going to be teaching med students, you can be doing lectures, you can be mentoring med students. So that's like one of the things if you go to an academic center where it's like university hospital combined, which is a lot of like, in the city hospitals, you're most likely going to be able to do both of those.
Great, thank you, Catherine. Is everyone able to see now? The results? No? Okay, I need tech assistance here. I'm able to see it, but I don't know how to share with you guys. I did put share.
Also, I can see it, but I don't know if that's because I'm co-host.
I believe that once you click end poll, it should release to the participants.
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
good point.
Mhm.
Or share results.
Oh, yes.
Okay, there we go. So everyone should be able
There
to
we
see. Like I
go.
said, please ask questions. If you're not, I'm sorry, I know that was a dark message and I said it out loud. But yeah, please feel free and we can just go over some of these polls. So how confident are people about being doctors? And most people are fairly confident, which I think is realistic, right? Like when I was in high school and stuff, I had like a general idea of what I wanted to do, but like it's very, amorphous. And I would say like, keep your options open in your mind, even if you're working towards things. And sometimes I think a good rule of thumb is pick the hardest thing that you want to do and go towards that, because it's always easier to fall back to everything else. And then what aspect of medical field interests you most? Most people say patient care, which like obviously sounds cool. Surgical procedures is another one. Pretty fair. I think patient care is a huge part of it. So like that's good to see, as well as surgical procedures. Okay, gap here. Most people answered no or not sure yet. Interesting. Which extracurricular activities are mostly involved in? A lot of people, I think 50% were science club organizations. Volunteering was 20%, and then music and arts were 20%, and sports 10. Like I said, that sounds about, perfectly fine, but I would always try to get people to expand their horizons, right? Like try joining at least a few different organizations outside of the strictly sciences. Like I did Model UN as well. Like that's something that's kind of like academic but not necessarily within sciences, that you should do, right? Like at least try to have one or two things that show variety in your skills, like on applications. And for TV shows, wow, a lot of people actually picked House. That's so interesting. Earlier we did this poll, I'm like, nobody picked House because he's kind of crazy. And also most of us didn't watch it. So that's really cool to see that a lot of people picked House as their favorite TV show or movie about doctors or magic. Superpower, a lot of people picked telepathy and teleportation. Is there anybody who wants to speak up and tell us why you picked either one of these things, like telepathy, teleportation? Like, what reason did you pick that? And also, I would love to hear from the people who picked House as a doctor TV show that they really liked. Like, why did you like House? Like, what was interesting about that? Also, feel free to drop in the chat if you're like camera shy or you don't want to talk out loud. Okay. Shout out any famous doctor, fictional or real. Once again, House seems to be the number one choice, which is, like I said, so unexpected for me. I think none of us earlier had picked House either, so it's interesting to see that a lot of people are like actually into Dr. House. I think most of us picked Dr. Fauci, and one of us picked Dr. Strange. And for what snack would you think would be energized during late night study sessions? Coffee was the majority answer, and then fruits and nuts. That makes me sad. I feel like coffee, I'm not a coffee person, so I'm always just like, let's not drink coffee, guys. Hopefully, you guys keep on with the coffee, but maybe not too much, because a lot of coffee can actually have negative impacts on your health. And then do you have a dream undergraduate or med school? Okay, so this is the last question. So most people say yes, you have a dream program. If you want to drop in the chat, like what is your dream program? Like any programs you could think of, like that way we can kind of get I guess, vibe and see if there's like some schools that seem to have like most of the votes or not. That would be great. And if people would be first gen, 100% of people said they would be first gen medical school students. So that's really cool to see as someone who's first gen and a medical school student. Like there's not that many of us. I think sometimes people think that like you take it for granted that like there's a lot of people who apply, but it really is not that many people who are first gen. So it's really good to see a lot of people who are there, and I hope you guys really like don't get discouraged. It can be difficult, you know, being first gen and not really having like a lot of background, but yeah. I'm gonna stop sharing the poll. And I guess if nobody has questions.
We also want to take a really quick picture just to commemorate today's event. So if you guys are willing, please turn on your cameras. I'll give you guys a couple minutes to do that.
Really want to thank everyone, you know, for this is a long session, and especially our speakers have been so, you know, dedicated and considering preparing. They want to share all their tips, all their strategies, all their stories with you to keep you encouraged and empowered into your journey in healthcare. So we really thank you guys for being here. So I know we're running way over time, but if you have one burning questions, we'll give you the chance to ask before we let everyone go. So take that opportunity.
And also because today we're a little tight on time, if our guest speakers could put their emails into the chat. So if you have any questions that you want to ask later on, you can go ahead and email our guest speakers.
Okay, yeah, so we want to thank again everyone for being here and our dedicated speakers for their really passionate, informative sessions tonight to keep us informed and encouraged. Please give them a round of applause for their efforts to make this event possible. And if you have any questions, you know, feel free to reach out, and I'll put our, you know, email address and our website there as well. So thank you very much, everyone. So wish everyone a great weekend. And again, please, join me to thank our speakers today for their wonderful presentations, and also Carissa for your wonderful coordination as well.
I'll go ahead and take the picture now. So if you guys could just look into the camera and smile.